Hello YouTubers and welcome back to Go Figure Customs YouTube channel. I've got another 2-minute tip, trick, and tutorial for you. And that is how to make a wet palette, a do-it-yourself wet palette. What is a wet palette? Well, it's a palette that's wet. Pretty simple, right? Why do you want a wet palette? Paint works best when it's thinned out. And it tends to dry pretty quickly in the air. So what you want to do is put it on your wet palette. It keeps it thinned out, it keeps it from drying, and it'll let you apply multiple light coats to your figure as you're painting. And for people that have trouble with Tamiya paints because they don't coat very well straight out of the jar, use a wet palette. And oh my God, they work a lot better off a wet palette. So how do you make a wet palette? What does it even look like? Well, number one, first off, before I get into that, I'd like to thank General Geekery viewer and guest Jim Godfrey for teaching me how to not only make it but use it. So I'm passing that knowledge from him that he gave to me on to you. And hopefully you can find it as useful as I have. And I think even my co-host JD is using a wet palette now. Also, a guest on the show, Yuri, had said that he backed a couple Kickstarters for wet palettes that he had bought. And I took a look at them and yeah, they're nice. But man, you don't have to spend money on it. So let's look at my wet palette. The base is a Tupperware lid, and that's basically just so water doesn't go anywhere. Regular old kitchen sponge, piece of parchment paper. That's it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take the bottom part of that Tupperware, which has water in it, and we're gonna get that sponge nice and wet. Go. And then I'm just going to lay that parchment paper down on top of it. And it tends to curl up when it's wet at first. So I usually set like 2 bottles of paint on the other end to prevent it from coming up. There you go. There's your wet palette. That's how you make it. It doesn't get any much simpler than that. Let me try something here real quick. I'm gonna pause. Well, this is kind of fun. I shot this part of the video already, but I didn't shoot the figure. The figure wasn't in view. So while I was editing this together, I'm like, you know what? I got all this shit ready. It's all handy. Let me just redo this. So this is still the same wet palette that I built. What essentially is a couple of seconds to you, but this is a couple of days worth of painting on it. So what we're going to do is, if you haven't seen it yet, I put up a video on dry brushing, and there's the results of that. And then I have 2 of these. I'm doing this for my Raptor custom. I need this to have the base coat of that. My airbrush took a shit, so normally I would be doing that probably with an airbrush. Actually, something this small, maybe not. Hand painting, something this small is probably better off, but regardless. So what I'm doing, I'm using some Vallejo dark gray. I really like this color. This is a fantastic color. I buy this by the bulk. So I am going to put some down on my wet palette. Maybe just a little bit more. There we go. Oh, that's probably a little wet. That's probably way too much there. And pick out my brush, which is never where I leave it. There it is. Mix maybe just a little bit more water in there with that. And this keeps it thin and it keeps it from drying. So let's do this here now.
You can see that the coat is very light, very thin paint, which is what you want. I've talked about it many times, having that melted crayon look on your customs. It's not good, doesn't look good, looks real sloppy. You want to thin your paints out to avoid that look. And this is the way to do it, painting with a wet palette. I do all of my hand painting now this way. Again, the Tamiya paint, which historically has been a difficult paint for customizers to use previously because of its kind of unique consistency. Again, number one, you've got to stir it, not shake it. And then number two, use a wet palette. I mean, I can think of one specific customizer, and I won't name names, but he does not like Tamiya paint because it's hard to use. And it's not hard to use if you know how to use it. And that's what we're here for, to learn how to use the stuff. And it's not hard, as you can see. I think I put down too much paint. I'm going to have to see if I've got another. Ooh, yeah, it is. And then if it's too thick, I move it over to another spot and thin it out again. And then paint from that spot until that paint's gone. You can see it's really thin now. So I'm going to move back over to where it's a little thicker. There you go. Super thin coats. I'll let that dry and then go back and look at it and see how it looks. Oh, let's see if I've got anything else I can paint real quick so I don't waste that paint. I should have, yes, I have another. Luckily, a bunch of people sent me a bunch of birds. This one's a cast, obviously. It was cast in red. It should illustrate how thin this coat is because you'll probably still be able to see some of this red under first coat. Potentially. Maybe not. Who knows? I guess we'll find out. Oof, yeah, I got way too much paint in there. But that's what's nice about this, is it doesn't dry out right away. So I can thin it out with some water. And it's just fine. And it won't dry out on my wet palette. So it extends the life of the paint while you're using it. That was one of the things that I did not like about dropper bottles. When I started getting like Vallejo and Scale Master paints, didn't like it because it came in a friggin' dropper bottle, and I've always painted from a jar, like Tamiya or Games Workshop. So I'm like, how am I supposed to paint from a dropper bottle? Well, use wet palette. So that's another little tip and trick for you if you're new to painting, and like me, you paint from a bottle. Because I don't like to mix my paints unless I have to. Because, I mean, I will if I have to, but to get the results that I do washes and dry brushing to get my results, and not mixing paint. I will buy the correct color that I need. And I am going to be a little sloppy on this, just because we're doing it for quickly. Oh, that's going to go to waste. God damn it. I probably wasted a lot of paint. Spot there. And spot another wing there. And there. And there, and there, and there. And that looks pretty good. Well, let's make sure I don't have any other stuff that needs to get painted. I got one more bird, but it's not primered. So, unfortunately, the rest of that paint's probably going to go to waste, but oh well. It was for a good cause for this video.
Well, there you go. There's your do-it-yourself wet palette. Really easy to make. If you've got a wife, girlfriend, or a mom, you've got parchment paper and a sponge and some Tupperware, and you got yourself a on the cheap wet palette that works fantastic. Yeah, you can buy them. I don't see why that. I mean, it may work better than this, but man, I don't know. This works pretty freaking well too. So that's why you want to use a wet palette. I had to reshoot the end of this video because I started off doing the painting that Fast Blast Viper, and then ended up switching over to the Falcons for my Raptor. And yeah, I mean, you can see this one's dry brushed and this one's not, and you can see how thin those coats are. I'm actually going to have to do a second coat on this, which is fine because even after editing the video, my paint's still good because I just got it all in my hands. To go back and do a second coat because the paint hasn't dried yet because it's on that nice wet palette. Mentioned it during the video, listening to my heavy breathing during the video. Sorry about that. To get your customs looking the best that you can get them, you need to thin your paint. I see this a lot with the new customizers. The paint, they don't thin the paint. They use paints like apple barrel paint, which is really thick, and it looks like that melted crayon. And you know who's guilty of customs that have that melted crayon look? Yeah, right here. I go back and look at some of my first customs. I'm like, whoa, holy crap, that looks horrible. It looks like I took a Bic lighter and Crayola, and that's how I painted it. But you know what? That's just because I didn't know better. I didn't know I needed to thin my paint out. I didn't know I could thin my paint out. I didn't know how to thin my paint out. And that's what we're here for. Your best bets for thin paints are an airbrush and a wet palette. Airbrushes, you know, there's a video on here on how to get the stuff that you need to buy one, and the stuff and kind of just getting started between those two videos. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass and there's a learning curve, but I'll tell you what, you get fantastic results with them. And I'm not doing anything fancy with it yet. I'm just putting base coats down pretty much. So I think that's about all I got on this particular video on how to make your own wet palette and how to use it. Again, I'd like to thank General Geekery viewers and guests, Jim Godfrey and Yuri from Stevie's Customs, for bringing up the topic of wet palettes on the General Geekery podcast. And I think that's, like I said, I think that's about it. That's all I got for this one. So please do all that fun social media stuff. Like, share, subscribe, comment below. And as always, thank you for watching.